the Torah tells us of a very important topic, a topic which is on the forefront of everyone's mind, and this is the concept of the Eshet Yifat Toar. This is the woman that, when a Jewish soldier goes out to war, sees her and is tempted by her looks, and he wants her. The Torah tells us in chapter 21, verse 11, V'ra'ita bashivya, and you saw in the captivity, Eshet Yifat Toar, a woman, a beautiful woman, V'hashakta ba, and you desired her, V'lakachta lecha leisha, and you took her for yourself as your wife. The Mamluez explains to us that we have to understand that this whole concept of the permission of a woman that's found and taken at war is a non-ideal situation. And he proves it from the verse. The verse says, you see her, and you desired her, and you had a lust for her, temptation. Ideally, the soldiers should go out to war and not seek the women that are there. But if he does, and he goes, she is permitted. It's a non-ideal. It's something that is there to give into the Yetzer Hara. So why does the Torah permit this woman to the soldier? So the Mamluez gives two explanations. The first explanation is that the Torah understands the psychology and the emotional state that this soldier is in. That when a soldier is at war, a soldier is vulnerable. They're weak. They're weak spiritually. They're weak physically. They're not comfortable. They're not at home. They're away from their element, and they're scared for their lives. So God says, I might as well permit the soldier to have this woman rather than saying it's prohibited and then he's going to transgress. But how does that answer? Many things are hard for us as Jews. Keeping kosher is hard. Keeping Shabbat is hard. Sometimes not killing someone's hard. Sometimes not stealing from someone's hard. Sometimes you really have to hold back. But maybe it's very hard. And let me do that. Let it be permissible there. What's so specific about this? So we have to understand, this is a very strong concept, that everything that happens in our life, whether it's easy or hard, it is a test. We have easier tests, we have harder tests. And I'll tell you a secret. As hard as a test could be, and even if you failed it many times over, chas v'shalom, it is still a test that you can beat, that you can come out victorious, no matter how hard it is. But on the other hand, God will never test an individual with something that they cannot beat. It's not free will. The same thing as it would not be free will if it would be so easy, it would also not be free will if it was completely impossible. And therefore, God dug deep into the soldier's mind and saw it would not be an option for him to hold back from the temptation of this woman at war when he is vulnerable. And therefore he permitted it. This is the first answer. Second answer is as follows. It says there are many prohibitions in our Torah. Yet each prohibition, and we're not going to go through each of them now, we'll only give a couple examples, but each prohibition has a dimension when it is permitted. Gives an example. We know that there are kosher animals. Parts of the kosher animal are permitted to eat, parts are not. For example, the gid hanasheh, the sciatic nerve, is a part of a kosher animal that we cannot eat. There are also two different types of animals. There's bigger animals, as we call behemot, and there are smaller animals called hayot. The fat, certain fat, it's called helev behema. The fat of a behema, a larger animal, kosher animal, is still prohibited to eat. It's something that's not allowed to eat. However, the permissible side, which is similar, the fat of a chaya, a smaller animal, is permitted. That's one example. Gives another example, that meat and milk, as we know it, is not allowed to be eaten. We're actually not allowed to cook meat and milk. We're not allowed to benefit from meat and milk. And we're obviously not allowed to eat from meat and milk. Can you imagine? Hopefully we've never tasted. But if you've never tasted, can you imagine what it tastes like to have something that's meat and milk together? I mean, Baruch Hashem, I've never tried it, but it sounds like something interesting. A cheeseburger, a Parmesan steak, but some, meat. Meatballs and spaghetti with cheese on top. I mean, just the concept gets me excited. Why don't we eat it? The Shem said so. But even though meat and milk are prohibited to be eaten together, and that taste that we would like to taste so much is still not allowed, there is something similar to that, which has a similar taste, which is allowed. Now imagine what? The udder of a cow. The udder of a cow, the breast of a cow, which produces the milk and feeds the babies. It's part of the kosher animal. It's actually allowed to be eaten. In the Shulchan Aruch, there's a machloket between the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah, exactly how to kosherize an udder, because there's milk. Do you need to slice it and push it again and squeeze it against the wall, squeeze out all the milk? Does it need to be only roasted when you eat it, so this way all the milk comes out? But nevertheless, there's still a milky taste to that meat, and that is a dimension of meat and milk which is permitted. So interesting. I'll give one more. We all know that pig is not allowed to be eaten. It's obviously one of the major ones. However, there's a certain psychological sickness that the Gemara speaks about, emotional, psychiatric sickness, which the cure to it is actually eating pig. And Chamim said in such a situation, pig would be allowed to be fed to this individual. So these are just all types of ideas where it's really prohibited, but there's a dimension when it is permitted. Comes now the Mamloez, and this is most of the Mefarshim commentaries say, an Eshet Ish, another man's wife, is completely prohibited to any other man, whether they're single or married. A married woman is designated, consecrated, special just for her husband. However, that's the prohibition. So where's the dimension of permissibility? Here. By the Eshet Yefat Toar, this captive, this woman who was spotted at war by the soldier. He sees her, he desires her, there's a temptation. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, we'll let it. All to show us, says the Mamloez, that God is the one who decides what is permitted and what is not. Because to us, if something's permitted, everything similar to that should also, if something's prohibited, then everything similar to that should also be prohibited. Because the same reason. No. God says no. I will tell you when it is prohibited and when it is permitted. This is the second answer he gives to why this woman was even allowed to the soldier. Before we move on to Zera Shimshon, one more chidush from the Mamloez. And with this, I'll give you a little bit more of a timeline and an overview view of what exactly is happening at war over here with this Jewish soldier. Says that there is 7 steps the Torah puts into this episode, which is to the greatest benefit, spiritually and physically, for the Jewish soldier and this woman. Look at this. Obviously with the soldier in a more important level, obviously because he was the Yehudi, he was the one with this commandment. But let's look at the verses. Starting off again in verse 11. The first thing is, Velakachta lecha leisha. You can have her. So, war is done. There's some women left over. And the Jewish soldier, well, at least they weren't killed, right? And the Jewish soldier, I didn't mean it that way. And the Jewish soldier, there's some plants left over, there's some gold, there's some women. I'm joking. And the Jewish soldier sees her and wants her. He's allowed to take her and be with her and have intimacy with her on the spot. Now, obviously not rape. We're not talking about rape. We're talking voluntarily. Right away then and there. That's the first step. And why? Because it was so hard for him to hold back from his temptation, God said, let's allow it, rather than him doing something which is not allowed. That's the first step. Second step is, V'ahaveta el toch betecha. This is in verse 12. You take her to your house. Why specifically to your house, explains the Mam Loez. She has to be in your house because you need to see what's going to go on over the next 30 days. Because the next 30 days is a trial period. Do you really want her as a wife? Do you really have feelings for her? Or were you selfish? So she's got to be at home. When I read that, I thought, people go out. They have friends. They have colleagues. Sometimes people have feelings for each other. But a lot of that changes when it wasn't pure when they move in together. Or when they get married and now they're living under the same roof. Because from afar, he's Mr. Perfect, she's Mrs. Perfect. But everybody's the same. Everybody wakes up with the morning face and dragon breath and everything else that comes along with it. And therefore, the Torah wants this woman in his house for 30 days. Mind you, they're not allowed any more physical contact or intimacy. It was just one time. So that was step 2, take her home. Number 3, get ready for this. Shave her head and cut her nails. Okay, long beautiful hair, very, very tempting, very beautiful. Zip down. Nails, no nail polish, no long nails, cut. The Torah now wants to make her, so to say, disgusting in his eyes, to see, does he really want her for who she is? Or was it just a facade? Was it just lust? 4, we're in verse 13. Ve'esira et simlat shivya me'alea. Take off her captive clothes. Take off the clothes that she was sent by her people and by her country to try to tempt you, which were beautiful, and now put her on some worn out and used clothes. Let her stay home. So let's count. She's home. She's bald. No nails. She's not wearing anything attractive. Yeah. Number 5. V'yasheva bevetecha uvacheta et avia vetima yerach yamim. In her new look, not a man's style. She's got to be sitting at your house for 30 days, crying that she has been taken away from her family. What happens when a woman cries? We should not know. But for 30 days, her eyes get swollen. They get red. Bags under her eyes. Again, nothing attractive. Now, number 6. After you waited this 30-day period to see, do you want her for who she is? Or was it just a temptation and a lust? Then you have the option to take her as a full-fledged wife. But if not, this is the 7th step, verse 14. But now what if you don't desire her? Those 30 days were very, very hard on you. You have to send her as a free woman. You cannot sell her as a slave to make a profit. And you are also not allowed to keep her as a servant or a slave. So let's just understand what's going on. Again, went to war, saw a woman, had a one-night stand, brought her home, 30 days of a complete unattraction, and now he has the choice to either stay committed to her and have her as a wife, or send her off as a free woman. He explains why does she need to be free? Why can't he sell her? Because the Torah did not want to entice or pay back any soldiers that went to war to take these women. Hey, it's amazing. You have a woman for one night. She was very beautiful. She was very tempting. And then you're able to sell her and make money. You're winning everywhere. The Torah says no. That one-time allowance was because, yes, the Yetzer Hara was burning in you. But then afterwards to benefit from it by selling her or keeping her as a slave, that cannot be. You either keep her as a wife and you're committed, or you send her off free. This is all as an introduction. Now the Zera Shimshon quotes Rashi. Rashi, on the second verse, on verse 11, tells us that this whole concept that we just said is only permitted by a war that takes place after the initial conquering of the land of Israel. That means when the Jewish people entered the land of Israel for the first time to conquer, even if they saw a woman at war that he had a temptation for lust, he could not touch her or take her. Afterwards, on defense or further conquering, that would be permitted. And the Zera Shimshon asks, 1 second over here. The whole reason why we permit this is because it's a temptation that he can't overcome. So what's the difference if it's on the way in conquering or if it's after the fact? War is war. God should understand the psychology of the soldier in his vulnerability, and he should be allowed to either have her all the time or never. So Zera Shimshon answers, this is more of a semantics answer, listen to this. He quotes the Rambam. The Rambam says that during the initial conquering of the land of Israel, all 7 of the nations that were there, living there, had to be completely annihilated. Men, women, and children. So that initial war, when they were conquering, anyone they saw that was not a Yehudi was killed. And therefore there was no such thing as a woman that you saw that you could allow to live for you to have a temptation to want to be with her. But on the other hand, what are we talking about? We're talking about a captive. We're talking about a woman who's a captive. The only time that this captive is allowed, the Rambam explains, and the Zera Shimshon is quoting, is talking about after war. All the men are killed. The land is conquered. Now what do we have? We have the slaves that are left over. We have the booty of the war. Literally like we said, we have their belongings, we have the gold and silver, we have the children, we have the women. Could be even some of the men. But in that crowd, the Jewish soldier sees a woman that he's attracted to. He didn't have an obligation to wipe them all out. Now after the war, this allowance was not during war. This was after the war. He was then allowed to take her and then eventually see after 30 days if he would keep her as a wife eternally for the rest of their life or not. What we learn from this concept is that God understands us. And as we said a moment ago, He understands our hardships, our temptations, our lusts. And as hard as certain things are, and there's different temptations for men and there's different for women. And for Sephardic Jews, there might be some temptations, and Ashkenaz Jews, other temptations. I don't know, to some gefilte fish is something you can't hold back from. Others. But seriously speaking, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us tests. And the tests that He gives us, we have to know that we have it in us to overcome. And if we didn't, He would have not have prohibited it.